The Trials of Apollo, The Dark Prophecy by Riordan. Chapter 1. Lester, Apollo, still human, thanks for asking. Gods, I hate my life. When our dragon declared war on Indiana, I knew it was going to be a bad day. We'd been travelling west for 6 weeks, and Festus had never shown such hostility towards a state. New Jersey he ignored. Pennsylvania he seemed to enjoy, despite our battle with the Cyclopses of Pittsburgh. Ohio he tolerated, even after our encounter with Potina, the Roman goddess of childhood drinks, who pursued us in the form of a giant red pitcher emblazoned with a smiley face. Yet for some reason, Festus decided he did not like Indiana. He landed on the cupola of the Indiana State House, flapped his metallic wings and blew a cone of fire that incinerated the state flag right off the flagpole. "Whoa, buddy!" Leo Valdez pulled the dragon's reins. "We've talked about this. No blowtorching public monuments." Behind him on the dragon's spine, Calypso gripped Festus's scales for balance. "Could we please get to the ground? Gently this time?" For a formerly immortal sorceress who once controlled our air spirits, Calypso was not a fan of flying. Cold wind blew her chestnut hair into my face, making me blink and spit. That's right, dear reader. I, the most important passenger, the youth who had once been the glorious god Apollo, was forced to sit on the back of the dragon. Oh, the indignities I had suffered since Zeus stripped me of my divine powers. It wasn't enough that I was now a 16-year-old mortal with the ghastly alias Lester Papadopoulos. It wasn't enough that I had to toil upon the earth doing, heroic quests until I could find a way back into my father's good graces, or that I had a case of acne that simply would not respond to over-the-counter zit medicine. Despite my New York State junior driver's license, Leo Valdez didn't trust me to operate his aerial bronze steed. Festus's claws scrabbled for a hold on the green copper dome, which was much too small for a dragon his size. I had a flashback to the time I installed a life-size statue of the muse, Calliope, on my sun chariot, and the extra weight of the hood ornament made me nosedive into China and create the Gobi Desert. Leo glanced back, his face streaked with soot. "Apollo, you sense something? Anything?" "Why is it my job to sense things, just because I used to be a god of prophecy? You're the one who's been having visions," Calypso reminded me. "You said your friend Meg would be here." Just hearing Meg's name gave me a twinge of pain. That doesn't mean I can pinpoint her location with my hand or my mind. Zeus has revoked my access to GPS. "GPS?" Calypso asked. "Godly positioning system. That's not a real thing. Guys, cool it." Leo patted the dragon's neck. "Apollo, just try, will you? Does this look like the city you dreamed about or not?" I scanned the horizon. Indiana was flat country. Highways crisscrossing scrubby brown plains. Shadows of winter clouds floated above urban sprawl. Around us rose a meagre cluster of downtown high-rises, stacks of stone and glass like layered wedges of black and white licorice. Not the yummy kind of licorice either, the nasty variety that sits for eons in your stepmother's candy bowl on the coffee table. And no, Hera, why would I be talking about you? After falling to earth in New York City, I found Indianapolis desolate and uninspiring, as if one proper New York neighbourhood, Midtown perhaps, had been stretched out to encompass the entire area of Manhattan, then relieved of 2/3 of its population and vigorously power-washed. I could think of no reason why an evil triumvirate of ancient Roman emperors would take interest in such a location, nor could I imagine why Meg McCaffrey would be sent here to capture me. Yet my visions had been clear. I had seen this skyline. I had heard my old enemy Nero give orders to Meg. "Go west. Capture Apollo before he can find the next oracle. If you cannot bring him to me alive, kill him." The truly sad thing about this, Meg was one of my better friends. She also happened to be my demigod master, thanks to Zeus's twisted sense of humour. As long as I remained mortal, Meg could order me to do anything, even kill myself. No, better not think of such possibilities. I shifted in my metal seat. After so many weeks of travel, I was tired and saddle-sore. I wanted to find a safe place to rest. This was not such a city. Something about the landscape below made me as restless as Festus. Alas, I was sure this was where we were meant to be. Despite the danger, if I had a chance of seeing Meg McCaffrey again, of prizing her away from her villainous stepfather's grasp, I had to try. "This is the spot," I said. "Before this dome collapses under us, I suggest we get to the ground." Calypso grumbled in ancient Minoan. "I already said that." "Well, excuse me, sorceress." I replied in the same language. "Perhaps if you had helpful visions, I'd listen to you more often." Calypso called me a few names that reminded me how colourful the Minoan language had been before it went extinct. "Hey, you two," Leo said. "No ancient dialects. Spanish or English, please. Or machine." Festus creaked in agreement. "It's okay, boy," Leo said. "I'm sure they didn't mean to exclude us. Now, let's fly down to street level, huh?" Festus's ruby eyes glowed. His metal teeth spun like drill bits. I imagined him thinking, Illinois is sounding pretty good right now. Bertie flapped his wings and leapt from the dome. We hurtled downward, landing in front of the State House with enough force to crack the sidewalk. My eyeballs jiggled like water balloons. Festus whipped his head from side to side, steam curling from his nostrils. I saw no immediate threats. Cars drove leisurely down West Washington Street. Pedestrians strolled by, a middle-aged woman in a flowery dress, a heavy-set policeman carrying a paper coffee cup labelled Café Patacho, a clean-cut man in a blue seersucker suit. The man in blue waved politely as he passed. "Morning." "Sup, dude?" Leo called. Calypso tilted her head. Why was he so friendly? Does he not see that we're sitting atop a 50-ton metal dragon? Leo grinned. "It's the mist, babe. Messes with mortal eyes, makes monsters look like stray dogs, makes swords look like umbrellas, makes me look even more handsome than usual." Calypso jabbed her thumbs into Leo's kidneys. "Ow," he complained. "I know what the mist is, Leonidas." "Hey, I told you never to call me that." "But the mist must be very strong here if it can hide a monster of Festus's size at such close range. Apollo, don't you find that a little odd?" I studied the passing pedestrians. True, I had seen places where the mist was particularly heavy. At Troy, the sky above the battlefield had been so thick with gods you couldn't turn your chariot without turning into another deity. Yet the Trojans and Greeks saw only hints of our presence. At 3 Mile Island in 1979, the mortals somehow failed to realise that their partial nuclear meltdown was caused by an epic chainsaw fight between Ares and Hephaestus. As I recall, Hephaestus had insulted Ares' bell-bottom jeans. Still, I just did not think heavy mist was the problem here. Something about these locals bothered me. Their faces were too placid. Their dazed smiles reminded me of ancient Athenians just before the Dionysus festival. Everyone in a good mood, distracted, thinking about the drunken riots and debauchery to come. "We should get out of the public eye," I suggested. "Perhaps." Festus stumbled, shaking like a wet dog. From inside his chest came a noise like a loose bicycle chain. "Oh, not again," Leo said. "Everybody off." Calypso and I quickly dismounted. Leo ran in front of Festus, held out his arms in a classic dragon wrangler's stance. "Hey, buddy, it's fine. I'm just going to switch you off for a while, okay? A little downtime to, Festus projectile vomited a column of flames that engulfed Leo. Fortunately, Valdez was fireproof. His clothes were not. From what Leo had told me, he could generally prevent his outfits from burning up simply by concentrating. If he were caught by surprise, however, it didn't always work. When the flames dissipated, Leo stood before us wearing nothing but his asbestos boxer shorts, his magical tool belt, and a pair of smoking, partially melted sneakers. "Dang it," he complained. "Festus, it's cold out here." The dragon stumbled. Leo lunged and flipped the lever behind the dragon's left foreleg. Festus began to collapse. His wings, limbs, neck, and tail contracted into his body, his bronze plates overlapping and folding inward. In a matter of seconds, our robotic friend had been reduced to a large bronze suitcase. That should have been physically impossible, of course, but like any decent god, demigod, or engineer, Leo Valdez refused to be stopped by the laws of physics. He scowled at his new piece of luggage. "Man, thought I fixed his gyro capacitor. Guess we're stuck here until I can find a machine shop." Calypso grimaced. Her pink ski jacket glistened with condensation from our flight through the clouds. "And if we find such a shop, how long would it take to repair Festus?" Leo shrugged. 12 hours? 15? He pushed a button on the side of the suitcase. A handle popped up. "Also, if we see a man's clothing store, that might be good." I imagined walking into a TK Maxx, Leo in boxer shorts and melted sneakers, rolling a bronze suitcase behind him. I did not relish the idea. Then, from the direction of the sidewalk, a voice called, "Hello?" The woman in the flowery dress had returned. At least she looked like the same woman. Either that or lots of ladies in Indianapolis wore purple and yellow honeysuckle pattern dresses and had 1950s bouffant hairstyles. She smiled vacantly. "Beautiful morning." It was in fact a miserable morning, cold and cloudy with a smell of impending snow, but I felt it would be rude to ignore her completely. I gave her a little parade wave, the sort of gesture I used to give my worshippers when they came to grovel at my altar. To me, the message was clear enough. "I see you, puny mortal. Now run along. The gods are talking." The woman did not take the hint. She strolled forward and planted herself in front of us. She wasn't particularly large, but something about her proportions seemed off. Her shoulders were too wide for her head. Her chest and belly protruded in a lumpy mass, as if she'd stuffed a sack of mangoes down the front of her dress. With her spindly arms and legs, she reminded me of some sort of giant beetle. If she ever tipped over, I doubted she could easily get back up. Oh my! She gripped her purse with both hands. Aren't you children cute? Her lipstick and eyeshadow were both a violent shade of purple. I wondered if she was getting enough oxygen to her brain. Madam, I said, we are not children. I could have added that I was over 4,000 years old, and Calypso was even older, but I decided not to get into that. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a suitcase to repair, and my friend is in dire need of a pair of jeans. I tried to step around her. She blocked my path. You can't go yet, dear. We haven't welcomed you to Indiana. From her purse, she drew a smartphone. The screen glowed as if a call were already in progress. It's him, all right? She said into the phone. Everybody, come on over. Apollo is here. My lungs shriveled in my chest. In the old days, I would have expected to be recognised as soon as I arrived in a town. Of course, the locals would rush to welcome me. They would sing and dance and throw flowers. They would immediately begin constructing a new temple. But as Lester Papadopoulos, I did not warrant such treatment. I looked nothing like my former glorious self. The idea that the Indianans might recognise me despite my tangled hair, acne and flab was both insulting and terrifying. What if they erected a statue of me in my present form, a giant golden Lester in the centre of their city? The other gods would never let me hear the end of it. Madam, I said, I'm afraid you have mistaken me. Don't be modest. The woman tossed her phone and purse aside. She grabbed my forearm with the strength of a weightlifter. Our master will be delighted to have you in custody, and please call me Nanette. Calypso charged. Either she wished to defend me, unlikely, or she was not a fan of the name Nanette. She punched the woman in the face. This by itself did not surprise me. Having lost her immortal powers, Calypso was in the process of trying to master other skills. So far she'd failed at swords, polearms, shurikens, whips and improvisational comedy. I sympathised with her frustration. Today, she decided to try fisticuffs. What surprised me was the loud crack her fist made against Nanette's face, the sound of finger bones breaking. Ow! Calypso stumbled away, clutching her hand. Nanette's head slid backwards. She released me to try to grab her own face, but it was too late. Her head toppled off her shoulders. It clanged against the tarmac and rolled sideways, the eyes still blinking, the purple lips twitching. Its base was smooth stainless steel. Attached to it were ragged strips of duct tape, stuck with hair and bobby pins. Holy Hephaestus! Leo ran to Calypso's side. Lady, you broke my girlfriend's hand with your face. What are you, an automaton? No, dear, said decapitated Nanette. Her muffled voice didn't come from the stainless steel head on the sidewalk. It emanated from somewhere inside her dress. Just above her collar, where her neck used to be, an outcropping of fine blonde hair was tangled with bobby pins. And I must say, hitting me wasn't very polite. Belatedly, I realised the metal head had been a disguise. Just as satyrs covered their hooves with human shoes, this creature passed for mortal by pretending to have a human face. Its voice came from its gut area, which meant... My knees trembled. A blemine, I said. Nanette chuckled. Her bulging midsection writhed under the honeysuckle cloth. She ripped open her blouse, something a polite Midwesterner would never think of doing, and revealed her true face. Where a woman's brassiere would have been, two enormous bulging eyes blinked at me. From her sternum protruded a large shiny nose. Across her abdomen curled a hideous mouth, glistening orange lips, teeth like a spread of blank white playing cards. Yes, dear, the face said, and I'm arresting you in the name of the Triumvirate. Up and down Washington Street, pleasant-looking pedestrians turned and began marching in our direction. Chapter 2. Headless guys and gals, not loving the Midwest vibe. Oh, look, a cheese ghost. Gee, Apollo, you may be thinking, why didn't you simply pull out your bow and shoot her? Or charm her with a song from your combat ukulele? True, I had both these items slung across my back along with my quiver. Sadly, even the best demigod weapons require something called maintenance. My children, Kayla and Austin, had explained this to me before I left Camp Half-Blood. I couldn't just pull my bow and quiver out of thin air, as I used to when I was a god. I could no longer wish my ukulele into my hands and expect it to be perfectly in tune. My weapons and my musical instrument were carefully wrapped in blankets. Otherwise, flying through the wet winter skies would have warped the bow, ruined the arrows and played Hades with the strings of my ukulele. To get them out now would require several minutes that I did not have. Also, I doubted they would be much use against bleme. I hadn't dealt with their kind since the time of Julius Caesar, and I would have been happy to go another 2,000 years without seeing one. How could a god of poetry and music be effective against the species whose ears were wedged under their armpits? Nor did the bleme fear or respect archery. They were sturdy melee fighters with thick skin. They were even resistant to most forms of disease, which meant they never called on me for medical help, nor feared my plague arrows. Worst of all, they were humorless and unimaginative. They had no interest in the future, so they saw no use for oracles or prophecies. In short, you could not create a race less sympathetic to an attractive, multi-talented god like me. And believe me, Ares had tried. Those 18th century Hessian mercenaries he cooked up, George Washington and I had the worst time with them. Leo, I said, activate the dragon. I just put him into a sleep cycle. Hurry. Leo fumbled with the suitcase's buttons. Nothing happened. I told you, man, even if Festus weren't malfunctioning, he's really hard to wake up once he's asleep. Wonderful, I thought. Calypso hunched over her broken hand, muttering Minoan obscenities. Leo shivered in his underwear, and I was Lester. On top of all that, instead of facing our enemies with a large fire-breathing automaton, we would now have to face them with a barely portable piece of metal luggage. I wheeled on the bleme. Begone, foul Nanette! I tried to muster my old godly wrath voice. Lay hands upon my divine person again, and you shall be destroyed. Back when I was a god, that threat would have been enough to make entire armies wet their camouflage pants. Nanette just blinked her cow-brown eyes. Don't fuss now, she said. Her lips were grotesquely hypnotic, like watching a surgical incision being used as a puppet. Besides, dearie, you're not a god anymore. Why did people have to keep reminding me of that? More locals converged on our position. 2 police officers trotted down the steps of the State House. At the corner of Senate Avenue, a trio of sanitation workers abandoned their garbage truck and lumbered over wielding large metal trash cans. From the other direction, a half-dozen men in business suits tromped across the State House lawn. Leo cursed. Is everybody in this town a metalhead? And I don't mean the good kind of metalhead. Relax, sweetie, Nanette said. Surrender and we won't have to hurt you much. That's the Emperor's job. Despite her broken hand, Calypso apparently didn't feel like surrendering. With a defiant yell, she charged Nanette again, this time launching a karate kick towards the bleme's giant nose. Don't, I blurted out. Too late. As I mentioned, bleme are sturdy things. They're difficult to hurt and even more difficult to kill. Calypso's foot connected with its target, and her ankle bent with a nasty pop. She collapsed, gurgling in pain. Cal! Leo ran to her side. Back off, chest face! Language, dear, Nanette chided. Now, I'm afraid I'll have to stomp on you. She raised one patent lever pump, but Leo was faster. He summoned a globe of fire and threw it like a baseball, hitting Nanette right between her huge chest-level eyes. Flames washed over her, setting her eyebrows and flowery dress ablaze. As Nanette screamed and stumbled, Leo yelled, Apollo, help me! I realised I'd been standing there, frozen in shock, which would have been fine if I'd been watching the scene unfold from the safety of my throne on Mount Olympus. Alas, I was very much down here in the trenches with the lesser beings. I helped get Calypso to her feet, her one good foot at least. We slung her arms over her shoulders, around our shoulders, with lots of screaming from Calypso, when I accidentally grabbed her broken hand and began hobbling away. 30 feet across the lawn, Leo suddenly stopped. I forgot Festus. Leave him, I snapped. What? We can't manage him and Calypso. We'll come back later. The bleme might ignore him. But if they figure out how to open him, Leo fretted, if they hurt him. Ah! Behind us, Nanette ripped off the shreds of her burning dress. From the waist down, shaggy blonde fur covered her body, not unlike a satyr. Her eyebrows smouldered, but otherwise her face looked unhurt. She spat ashes from her mouth and glared in our direction. That was not nice! Get them! The businessmen were almost on top of us, eliminating any hope that we could make it back to Festus without getting caught. We chose the only heroic option available. We ran. I hadn't felt so encumbered since my three-legged death race with Meg McCaffrey back at Camp Half-Blood. Calypso tried to help, kicking along like a pogo stick between Leo and me, but whenever she jostled her broken foot or hand, she yelped and sagged against us. Sorry, guys, she muttered, her face beaded with sweat. Guess I'm not meant to be a melee fighter. Neither am I admitted. Perhaps Leo can hold them off while, Hey, don't look at me, Leo grumbled. I'm just a repair guy who can throw the occasional fireball. Our fighter is stuck back there in suitcase mode. Hobble faster, I suggested. We reached the street alive only because the bleme moved so slowly. I suppose I would too if I were balancing a fake metal head on my, head, but even without their disguises, the bleme were not as swift as they were strong. Their terrible depth perception made them walk with exaggerated caution, as if the ground were a multi-layered hologram. If only we could out-hobble them. Good morning, A police officer appeared on our right, his firearm drawn. "Halt, or I will shoot. Thank you." Leo pulled a stoppered glass bottle from his tool belt. He tossed it at the officer's feet, and green flames exploded around him. The officer dropped his gun. He began tearing off his burning uniform, revealing a chest face with a shaggy pectoral eyebrows and a belly beard in need of a shave. "Phew," Leo said. "I was hoping he was a bleme. That was my only vial of Greek fire, guys, and I can't keep summoning fireballs unless I want to pass out, so, we need to find cover," said Calypso. Sensible advice, but cover did not seem to be an Indiana concept. The streets were wide and straight, the landscape flat, the crowd sparse, the sightlines endless. We turned into South Capitol. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the mob of smiling, fake-headed locals gaining on us. A construction worker stopped to rip the fender off a Ford pickup, then rejoined the parade, his new Chrome's club slung over his shoulder. Meanwhile, the regular mortals, at least those who did not seem interested in killing us at the moment, went about their business, making phone calls, waiting at traffic lights, sipping coffee in nearby cafes, completely ignoring us. At one corner, sitting on a milk crate, a heavily blanketed homeless man asked me for change. I resisted the urge to tell him that change was coming up fast behind us, carrying assorted weapons. My heart pounded. My legs shook. I hated having a mortal body. I experienced so many bothersome things like fear, cold, nausea, and the impulse to whimper, "Please don't kill me." If only Calypso hadn't broken her ankle, we might have moved faster, but we couldn't very well leave her behind. Not that I particularly liked Calypso, mind you, but I'd already convinced Leo to abandon his dragon. I didn't want to push my luck. "There," said the sorceress. She pointed with her chin to what looked like a service alley behind a hotel. I shuddered, remembering my first day in New York as Lester Papadopoulos. What if it's a dead end? The last time I found myself in a dead-end alley, things did not go well. "Let's try," Leo said. "We might be able to hide in there. Or, I don't know." "I don't know" sounded like a sketchy plan B, but I had nothing better to offer. Good news, the alley was not a dead end. I could clearly see an exit at the far end of the block. Bad news, the loading bays along the back of the hotel were locked, giving us nowhere to hide, and the opposite wall of the alley was lined with dumpsters. Oh, dumpsters, how I hated them. Leo sighed. "I guess we could jump in." "No," I snapped. "Never again." We struggled through the alley as fast as we could. I tried to calm my nerves by silently composing a sonnet about various ways a wrathful god could destroy dumpsters. I became so engrossed, I didn't notice what was in front of us until Calypso gasped. Leo halted. "What the? Hijo!" The apparition glowed with a faint ginger light. He wore a traditional chiton, sandals and a sheathed sword, like a Greek warrior in the prime of life, except for the fact that he had been decapitated. Unlike the bleme, however, this person obviously had once been human. Ethereal blood trickled from his severed neck, splattering his luminous orange tunic. "It's a cheese-coloured ghost," Leo said. The spirit raised one hand, beckoning us forward. Not being born a mortal, I had no particular fear of the dead. You've seen one tormented soul, you've seen them all. But something about this ghost unsettled me. He stirred a distant memory, a feeling of guilt from thousands of years ago. Behind us, the voices of the bleme grew louder. I heard them calling out, "Morning," and "Excuse me," and "Lovely day" to their fellow Indianans. "What do we do?" Calypso asked. "Follow the ghost," I said. "What?" Leo yelped. "We follow the cheese-coloured ghost, as you're always saying, vaya con queso." "That was a joke, esse." The orange spirit beckoned again, then floated towards the end of the alley. Behind us, the man's voice shouted, "There you are! Lovely weather, isn't it?" I turned in time to see a truck fender spiralling towards us. "Down!" I tackled Calypso and Leo, provoking more screams of agony from the sorceress. The truck fender sailed over our heads and slammed into a dumpster, sending up a festive explosion of garbage confetti. We struggled to our feet. Calypso was shivering, no longer complaining about the pain. I was fairly sure she was going into shock. Leo pulled a staple gun from his tool belt. "You guys go ahead. I'll hold them off as long as I can." "What are you going to do?" I demanded. "Sort and collate them?" "I'm going to throw things at them," Leo snapped, "unless you've got a better idea." But both of you stop," Calypso stammered. "We don't leave anyone behind. Now walk. Left, right, left, right." We emerged from the alley into a wide-open circular plaza. Oh, why couldn't Indianans build a proper city with narrow, twisting streets, plenty of dark corners, and perhaps some conveniently placed bomb-proof bunkers? In the middle of a ring-shaped drive stood a fountain surrounded by dormant flower beds. To the north rose the twin towers of another hotel. To the south loomed an older, grander building of red brick and granite, perhaps a Victorian-era train station. On one side of the edifice, a clock tower soared roughly 200 feet into the sky. Above the main entrance, under a marble archway, a colossal rose window gleamed in a frame of green copper, like a stained glass version of the dartboard we used for our weekly game night on Mount Olympus. That thought made me heartsick with nostalgia. I would have given anything to be back home for game night, even if it meant listening to Athena gloat about her Scrabble scores. I scanned the plaza. Our ghostly guide seemed to have disappeared. Why had he brought us here? Should we try the hotel? The train station? Those questions became moot when the bleme surrounded us. The mob burst out of the alley behind us. A police car swerved into the roundabout next to the train station. A bulldozer pulled into the hotel's driveway, the operator waving and calling out cheerfully, "Hello, I'm going to bulldoze you." All exits from the plaza were quickly blocked. A line of sweat freeze-dried against my neck. An annoying whine filled my ears, which I realised was my own sub-vocalised whimpering of "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me." I won't die here, I promised myself. I'm much too important to bite it in Indiana. But my trembling legs and chattering teeth seemed to disagree. Who has an idea? I asked my compatriots. Please, any brilliant idea? Calypso looked like her most brilliant idea at the moment was trying not to throw up. Leo hefted his staple gun, which didn't seem to frighten the bleme. From the midst of the mob, our old friend Nanette emerged, her chest face grinning. Her patent leather pumps clashed terribly with her blonde leg fur. "Gosh darn it, dears, you've made me a bit miffed." She grabbed the nearest street sign and single-handedly ripped it out of the ground. "Now, please hold still, won't you? I'm just going to smash your heads with this." Chapter 3. My last performance. Some old lady drops the mic and kills everyone. I was about to initiate Defence Plan Omega, falling to my knees and begging for mercy, when Leo saved me from that embarrassment. "Bulldozer," he whispered. "Is that a code word?" I asked. "No, I'm going to sneak over to the bulldozer. You two distract the metalheads." He shifted Calypso's weight to me. "Are you crazy?" she hissed. Leo shot her an urgent look, like, "Trust me, distract them." Then he took a careful step sideways. "Oh," Nanette beamed. "Are you volunteering to die first, short demigod? You did hit me with fire, so that makes sense." Whatever Leo had in mind, I imagined his plan would fail if he began arguing with Nanette about his height. Leo was a bit sensitive about being called short. Fortunately, I have a natural talent for focusing everyone's attention on me. "I volunteer for death," I shouted. The entire mob turned to look at me. I silently cursed my choice of words. I should have volunteered for something easier, like baking a pie or post-execution clean-up duty. I often speak without the benefit of forethought. Usually it works out. Sometimes it leads to improvisational masterpieces, like the Renaissance or the Beat movement. I had to hope this would be one of those times. "But first," I said, "hear my plea. Oh, merciful bleme." The policeman who Leo had torched lowered his gun. A few green embers of Greek fire still smouldered in his belly beard. "What do you mean, hear my plea?" "Well," I said, "it's customary to hear the last words of a dying man, or god, or demigod, or, what would you consider yourself, Calypso, a titan? A demi-titan?" Calypso cleared her throat with a noise that sounded suspiciously like idiot. "What Apollo is trying to say, O merciful bleme, is that etiquette demands you grant us a few last words before you kill us. I'm sure you wouldn't want to be impolite." The bleme looked aghast. They lost their pleasant smiles and shook their mechanical heads. Nanette shuffled forward, her hands raised in a placating manner. "No, indeed, we are very polite." "Extremely polite," the policeman agreed. "Thank you," said Nanette. "You're welcome," said the policeman. "Listen then," I cried. "Friends, frenemies, bleme, open your armpits and hear my sad tale." Leo shuffled back another step, his hands in the pockets of his tool belt. Another 57, 58 steps and he would arrive at the bulldozer. Fantastic. "I am Apollo," I began, "formerly a god. I fell from Olympus, cast down by Zeus, unfairly blamed for starting a war with the giants." "I'm going to be sick," Calypso muttered. "Let me sit down." "You're breaking my rhythm. You're breaking my eardrums. Let me sit." I eased Calypso onto the fountain's retaining wall. Nanette raised her street sign. "Is that it? May I kill you now?" No, I said. "I'm just letting Calypso sit so she can act as my chorus. A good Greek performance always needs a chorus." Calypso's hand looked like a crushed aubergine. Her ankle had swollen around the top of her sneaker. I didn't see how she could stay conscious, much less act as a chorus, but she took a shaky breath and nodded. "Ready." "Lo," I said, "I arrived at Camp Half-Blood as Lester Papadopoulos." A pathetic mortal, Calypso chorused, most worthless of teens. I glared at her, but I didn't dare stop my performance again. I overcame many challenges with my companion, Meg McCaffrey. He means his master, Calypso added, a 12-year-old girl. Behold her pathetic slave, Lester, most worthless of teens. The policeman huffed impatiently. We know all this, the Emperor told us. Shh, said Nanette. Be polite. I put my hand over my heart. We secured the Grove of Dodona, an ancient oracle, and thwarted the plans of Nero. But alas, Meg McCaffrey fled from me. Her evil stepfather had poisoned her mind. Poison, Calypso cried, like the breath of Lester Papadopoulos, most worthless of teens. I resisted the urge to push Calypso into the flower bed. Meanwhile, Leo was making his way towards the bulldozer under the guise of an interpretive dance routine, spinning and gasping and pantomiming my words. He looked like a hallucinating ballerina in boxer shorts, but the bleme politely got out of his way. Lo, I shouted, from the oracle of Dodona we received a prophecy, a limerick most terrible. Terrible, Calypso chorused, like the skills of Lester, most worthless of teens. Very your adjectives, I grumbled, and then continued for my audience. We travelled west in search of another oracle, along the way fighting many fearsome foes. The Cyclopses we brought low. Leo jumped onto the running board of the bulldozer. He raised his staple gun dramatically, then stapled the bulldozer operator twice in the pectorals, right where his actual eyes would be. That could not have felt good, even for a tough species such as the bleme. The operator screamed and grabbed his chest. Leo kicked him out of the driver's seat. The police officer yelled, Hey! Wait, I implored them. Our friend is only giving you a dramatic interpretation of how we beat the Cyclopses. That's totally allowed while telling a story. The crowd shifted uncertainly. These are very long last words, Nanette complained. When will I get to smash your head in? Soon, I promised. Now, as I was saying, we travelled west. I hauled Calypso to her feet again with much whimpering on her part, and a little bit on mine. What are you doing? She muttered. Work with me, I said. Lo, frenemies! Behold how we travelled. The two of us staggered towards the bulldozer. Leo's hands flew over the controls. The engine roared to life. This isn't a story, the police officer protested. They're getting away. No, not at all. I pushed Calypso onto the bulldozer and climbed up after her. You see, we travelled for many weeks like this. Leo started backing up. Beep, beep, beep. The bulldozer's shovel began to rise. Imagine you are Camp Half-Blood, I shouted to the crowd, and we are travelling away from you. I realised my mistake. I'd asked the bleme to imagine. They simply weren't capable of that. Stop them! The police officer raised his gun. His first shot ricocheted off the dozer's metal scoop. Listen, my friends, I implored. Open your armpits. But we had exhausted their politeness. A trash can sailed over our heads. A businessman picked up a decorative stone urn from the corner of a fountain and tossed it at our direction, annihilating the hotel's front window. Faster, I told Leo. Trying, man, he muttered. This thing wasn't built for speed. The bleme closed in. Look out, Calypso yelled. Leo swerved just in time to deflect a wrought iron bench off our dozer blade. Unfortunately, that opened us up to a different attack. Nanette threw her street sign like a harpoon. The metal pole pierced the bulldozer's chassis in a burst of steam and grease, and our getaway ride shuddered to a halt. Great, Calypso said. Now what? This would have been an excellent time for my godly strength to return. I could have waded into battle, tossing my enemies aside like rag dolls. Instead, my bones seemed to liquefy and pool in my shoes. My hands shook so badly I doubted I could unwrap my own bow, even if I tried. Oh, that my glorious life should end this way, crushed by polite, headless people in the American Midwest. Nanette leapt onto the hood of our bulldozer, giving me a ghastly view straight up her nostrils. Leo tried to blast her with the flames, but this time Nanette was prepared. She opened her mouth and swallowed the fireball, showing no sign of distress except for a small burp. Don't feel too bad, dears, she told us. You never would have gained access to the Blue Cave. The Emperor has it too well guarded. A shame you have to die, though. The naming celebration is in 3 days, and you and the girl were supposed to be the main attractions in his slave procession. I was too terrified to fully process her words. The girl. Did she mean Meg? Otherwise, I heard only blue, die, slave, which at the moment seemed an accurate summary of my existence. I knew it was hopeless, but I slipped my bow from my shoulder and began to unwrap it. Suddenly an arrow sprouted between Nanette's eyes. She went cross-eyed, trying to see it, and then tumbled backwards and crumbled to dust. I stared at my blanketed weapon. I was a fast archer, yes, but I was fairly sure I hadn't fired that shot. A shrill whistle caught my attention. In the middle of the plaza, standing atop the fountain, a woman crouched in faded jeans and a silvery winter coat. A white birch bow gleamed in her hand. On her back, a quiver bristled with arrows. My heart leapt, thinking that my sister Artemis had come to help me at last. But no. This woman was at least 60 years old, her grey hair tied back in a bun. Artemis would never appear in such a form. For reasons she had never shared with me, Artemis had an aversion to looking any older than, say, 20. I told her countless times that beauty was ageless. All the Olympian fashion magazines will tell you that 4,000 is the new 1,000, but she simply wouldn't listen. The grey-haired woman shouted, "Hit the ground!" All around the plaza, manhole-sized circles appeared in the asphalt. Each one scissored open like the iris of a camera, and turrets sprang up, mechanical crossbows swivelling and sweeping red, targeting lasers in every direction. The Blemai didn't try to take cover. Perhaps they didn't understand. Perhaps they were waiting for the grey-haired woman to say please. I, however, didn't need to be an archery god to know what would happen next. I tackled my friends for the second time that day, which in retrospect, I have to admit, felt a wee bit satisfying. We tumbled off the bulldozer as the crossbows fired in a flurry of sharp hisses. When I dared to raise my head, nothing was left of the Blemai but piles of dust and clothing. The grey-haired woman jumped from the top of the fountain. Given her age, I was afraid she might break her ankles, but she landed gracefully and strolled towards us, her bow at her side. Wrinkles were etched across her face. The skin under her chin had begun to sag. Liver spots dotted the backs of her hands. Nevertheless, she held herself with the regal confidence of a woman who had nothing left to prove to anyone. Her eyes flashed like moonlight on water. Something about those eyes were very familiar to me. She studied me for a count of 5 and then shook her head in amazement. So it's true. You're Apollo. Her tone was not the general, "Oh wow, Apollo," sort of attitude I was used to. She said my name as if she knew me personally. Have we met? You don't remember me, she said. No, I don't suppose you would. Call me Emmy. And the ghost you saw, that was Agamephis. He led you to our doorstep. The name Agamephis definitely sounded familiar, but as usual I couldn't place it. My human brain just kept giving that annoying memory full message, asking me to delete a few centuries of experiences before I could continue. Emmy glanced at Leo. Why are you in your underwear? Leo sighed. Been a long morning, abuela, but thanks for the assist. Those crossbow turrets are the bomb diggity. Thank you, I think. Yeah, so maybe you could help us with Cal here? Leo continued. She's not doing so well. Emmy crouched next to Calypso, whose complexion had turned the colour of cement. The sorceress's eyes were shut, her breathing ragged. She's badly hurt. Emmy frowned as she studied Calypso's face. You said her name was Cal? Calypso, Leo said. Ah. Emmy's worry lines deepened. That explains it. She looks so much like Zoe. A knife twisted inside me. Zoe Nightshade. In her feverish state, Calypso muttered something I couldn't make out. Perhaps the name Nightshade. For centuries, Zoe had been Artemis's lieutenant, the leader of her hunters. She died in battle just a few years ago. I don't know if Calypso and Zoe had ever met, but they were half-sisters, both daughters of the Titan Atlas. I'd never considered how much they looked alike. I regarded Emmy. If you knew Zoe, then you must be one of my sister's hunters. But you can't be, you're... I stopped myself before I could say old and dying. Hunters neither aged nor died, unless they were killed in combat. This woman was quite obviously mortal. I could sense her fading life energy, so depressingly like mine. Not at all like an immortal being's. It's hard to explain how I could tell, but it was perfectly clear to me, like hearing the difference between a perfect fifth and a diminished fifth. In the distance, emergency sirens wailed. I realised we were having this conversation in the middle of a small disaster zone. Mortals, or more Blemai, would soon be arriving. Emmy snapped her fingers. All around the plaza, the crossbow turrets retracted. The portals closed as if they'd never existed. We need to get off the street, Emmy said. Come, I'll take you to the way station. Chapter 4. No building should be a secret from Apollo, or drop bricks on him. We didn't have to go far. Carrying Calypso between us, Leo and I followed Emmy to the big ornate building at the plaza's south end. As I suspected, it was a railroad depot at some point. Carved in granite under the rose window were the words Union Station. Emmy ignored the main entrance. She veered right and stopped in front of a wall. She ran her finger between the bricks, tracing the shape of a doorway. Mortar cracked and dissolved. A newly cut door swung inward, revealing a narrow chute like a chimney, with metal rungs leading up. Nice trick, Leo said, but Calypso's not exactly in wall-climbing condition. Emmy knitted her brow. You're right. She faced the doorway. Way station. Can we have a ramp, please? The metal rungs vanished. With a soft rumble, the chute's interior wall slanted backwards, the bricks rearranging themselves into a gentle upward slope. Whoa, said Leo. Did you just talk to the building? A smile tugged at the corner of Emmy's mouth. The way station is more than a building. Suddenly I did not fancy the look of that ramp. This is a living structure, like the labyrinth? And you expect us to go inside? Emmy's glance was definitely the look of a hunter. Only my sister's followers would dare to give me such a malodorous stink eye. The way station is no work of Daedalus, Lord Apollo. It's perfectly safe, as long as you remain our guests. Her tone suggested that my welcome was probationary. Behind us, the emergency sirens grew louder. Calypso inhaled raggedly. I decided we didn't have much choice. We followed Emmy into the building. Lighting appeared along the walls, warm yellow candles flickering in bronze sconces. About 20 feet up the ramp, a door opened on our left. Inside I glimpsed an infirmary that would have made my son Asclepius jealous. A fully stocked supply cabinet with medicine, surgical tools and potion ingredients, a hospital bed with built-in monitors, GCI interface and levitating bariatric slings, racks of healing herbs dried against the wall next to the portable MRI machine, and in the back corner, a glassed-in habitat seethed with poisonous snakes. Oh my, I said, your med bay is cutting edge. Yes, Emmy agreed, and way station is telling me I should treat your friend immediately. Leo poked his head into the infirmary. You mean this room just appeared here? No, Emmy said. Well, yes. It's always here, but it's easier to find when we need it. Leo nodded thoughtfully. You think the way station could organise my sock drawer? A brick fell from the ceiling and clunked at Leo's feet. That's a no, Emmy interpreted. Now, if I can have your friend, please. Leo pointed to the glass habitat. You got snakes in there, just saying. I'll take good care of Calypso, Emmy promised. She took Calypso from us, lifting the sorceress in her arms with no apparent difficulty. You two go ahead. You'll find Jo at the top of the ramp. Jo? I asked. You can't miss her, Emmy promised. She'll explain the way station better than I could. She carried the sorceress into the infirmary, the door shut behind her. Leo frowned at me. Snakes? Oh yes, I assured him. There's a reason a snake on a rod symbolises medicine. Venom was one of the earliest cures. Huh? Leo glanced at his feet. You think I can keep this brick at least? The corridor rumbled. I would leave it there, I suggested. Yeah, think I'll leave it there. After a few more feet, another door opened on our right. Inside, sunlight filtered through pink lace curtains onto the hardwood floor of a child's room. A cosy bed was piled with fluffy comforters, pillows and stuffed animals. The eggshell-coloured walls had been used as a canvas for crayon art. Stick figure people, trees, houses, frolicking animals that might have been dogs or horses or llamas. On the left-hand wall, opposite the bed, a crayon sun smiled down on a field of happy crayon flowers. In the centre, a stick figure girl stood between two larger parental stick figures, all three of them holding hands. The wall art reminded me of Rachel Elizabeth Dare's Cavern of Prophecy at Camp Half-Blood. My Delphic oracle had delighted in painting her cave with things she'd seen in her visions, before her oracular power ceased to work. That is. Totally not my fault. You can blame that overgrown rat, snake, python. Most of the drawings in this bedroom seemed typical for a child of about 7 or 8, but in the furthest corner of the back wall, the young artist had decided to inflict a nightmarish plague upon her crayon world. A scribbly black storm was brewing. Frowning stick figures threatened the llamas with triangular knives. Dark curlicules blotted out a primary-coloured rainbow. Scratched over the field of green grass was a huge inky sphere like a black pond, or the entrance of a cave. Leo stepped back. I don't know, man. Don't think we should go in. I wondered why the way station had decided to show us this room. Who lived here? Or more accurately, who had lived here? Despite the cheerful pink curtains and the pile of stuffed animals on the carefully made bed, the bedroom felt abandoned, preserved like a museum exhibit. Let's keep going, I agreed. Finally, at the top of the ramp, we emerged into a cathedral-like hall. Overhead curved a barrelled ceiling of wood carvings, with glowing stained glass panels in the centre, creating green and gold geometric designs. At the far end of the room, the rose window I'd seen outside cast dartboard-lined shadows across the painted cement floor. To our left and right, there were raised walkways with wrought iron railings, and elegant Victorian lampposts lined the walls. Behind the railings, rows of doorways led into other rooms. Half a dozen ladders stretched up to the ornate moulding at the base of the ceiling, where the ledges were stuffed like hay-like roosts for very large chickens. The whole place had a faint animal scent. though it reminded me more of a dog kennel than a hen house. In one corner of the main room gleamed a chef's kitchen, big enough to host several celebrity cook-offs at once. Sets of sofas and comfy chairs were clustered here and there. At the centre of the hall stood a massive dining table of rough-hewn redwood, with seating for 20. Under the rose window, the contents of several different workshops seemed to have been disgorged at random. Table saws, drills, lathes, kilns, forges, anvils, 3D printers, sewing machines, cauldrons, and several other industrial appliances I couldn't name. Don't judge me, I'm not Hephaestus. Hunched over a welding station, throwing sparks from her torch as she worked on a sheet of metal, was a muscular woman in a metal visor, leather apron and gloves. I'm not sure how she noticed us. Perhaps the way station chucked a brick at her to get her attention. Whatever the case, she looked in our direction, shut off her torch and then lifted her visor. "I'll be hexed." She barked out a laugh. "Is that Apollo?" She tugged off her safety gear and lumbered over. Like Emmy, the woman was in her 60s, but whereas Emmy had the physique of a former gymnast, this woman was built for brawling. Her broad shoulders and dark, well-sculpted arms stretched against the confines of a faded pink polo shirt. Wrenches and screwdrivers sagged from the pockets of her denim overalls. Against the umber skin of her scalp, her buzz-cut grey hair shimmered like frost. She thrust out her hand. "You probably don't remember me, Lord Apollo. I'm Joe, or Josie, or Josephine, whichever." With each version of her name, she squeezed my hand tighter. I would not have challenged her to an arm wrestling contest, though with her meaty fingers I doubt she could play guitar as well as I do, so ha! Her square-jawed face would have been quite intimidating except for her cheerful twinkling eyes. Her mouth twitched, as if she were exerting a great effort not to burst out laughing. "Yes," I squeaked, extracting my hand. No, I'm afraid I don't remember. May I introduce Leo?" "Leo." She crushed his hand with enthusiasm. "I'm Joe." All these people whose names ended in O, Joe, Leo, Calypso, Apollo, suddenly made me feel like my brand was being diluted. I thanked the gods we were not in Ohio and our dragon was not named Festo. "I think I'll call you Josephine," I decided. "It's a lovely name." Josephine shrugged. "Fine by me. Where's your friend Calypso?" "Wait," Leo said. "How do you know about Calypso?" Josephine tapped her left temple. "Waystation tells me stuff." "Oh," Leo's eyes widened. "That's cool." I wasn't so sure. Normally, when someone said that a building was talking to them, I got away from them as quickly as possible. Sadly, I believed Josephine. I also had the feeling we would be needing her hospitality. "Calypso's in the infirmary," I offered. "Broke her hand and foot." "Ah." The sparkle dimmed in Josephine's eyes. "Yeah. You met the neighbours." "You mean the Blemai?" I imagined the neighbours stopping by to borrow a socket wrench or take an order for Girl Scout cookies or murder someone. "Do you often have problems with them?" "Didn't used to," Josephine sighed. "By themselves, Blemai are pretty harmless, as long as you're polite to them. They don't have enough imagination to organise an assault. But since last year..." "Let me guess," I said. "Indianapolis has a new emperor." A ripple of anger washed across Josephine's face, giving me a glimpse of what it would be like to get on her bad side. Hint, it involved pain. "Best we don't talk about the Emperor until Emmy and your friend join us," she said. "Without Emmy around to keep me calm, I get worked up." I nodded. Not getting Josephine worked up sounded like an excellent plan. "But we're safe here?" Leo held out his palm as if checking for brick raindrops. "That was my question too. We kind of led an angry mob to your doorstep." Josephine waved aside our concern. "Don't worry. The Emperor's forces have been searching for us for months. The way station isn't easy to find unless we invite you in." "Huh." Leo tapped the door with his foot. "So, did you design this place? 'Cause it's pretty awesome." Josephine chuckled. "I wish. A demigod architect with way more talent than me did that. Built the way station back in the 1880s. Early days of the Transcontinental Railroad. It was meant as a refuge for demigods, satyrs, hunters. Pretty much anyone who needed one here in the middle of the country. Emmy and I are just lucky enough to be the present caretakers." "I've never even heard of this place," I said grumpily. "We, keep a low profile. Lady Artemis's orders. Need-to-know basis." As a god, I was the very definition of need-to-know, but it was typical of Artemis to keep something like this to herself. She was such a doomsday prepper, always hiding things from the other gods, like stashes of supplies, emergency bunkers, and small nation-states. "I assume this place isn't a train station anymore. What do mortals think it is?" Josephine grinned. "Way station. Transparent floor. Please." Beneath our feet, the stained cement disappeared. I leapt back as if standing on a hot skillet, but the floor was not actually gone. It had simply turned see-through. Around us, the rugs, furniture and workshop equipment seemed to hover 2 stories over the actual ground floor of the hall, where 20 or 30 banquet tables had been set up for some sort of event. Our living space occupies the top of the grand hall, Josephine said. That area below us was once the main concourse for the station. Now the mortals rent it out for weddings and parties and whatnot. If they look up, adaptive camouflage, Leo guessed. They see an image of the ceiling, but they don't see you. Nice. Josephine nodded, obviously pleased. Most of the time it's quiet around here, though it gets noisy on weekends. If I have to hear thinking out loud from one more wedding cover band, I may have to drop an anvil. She pointed to the floor, which immediately turned back to opaque cement. Now, if you guys don't mind, I need to finish a section of a project I'm working on. Don't want the metal plates to cool without proper welding. After that, you're a child of Hephaestus, aren't you? Leo said. Hecate, actually. Leo blinked. No way, but that sweet workshop area you got. Magical construction is my speciality, said Josephine. My mortal dad, was a mechanic. Nice, Leo said. My mum was a mechanic. Hey, if I could use your machine tools, I left this dragon at the State House and, I interrupted. As much as I wanted Festus back, I did not think a nearly indestructible, impossible-to-open suitcase was in any immediate danger. I was also afraid that if Leo and Josephine started chatting, they would soon be bonding over the wonders of serrated flange bolts, and I would die of boredom. Josephine, you were about to say after that. Right, Josephine agreed. Give me a few minutes. Then I can show you to some guest rooms and maybe get Leo here some clothing. These days we've got plenty of vacancies, unfortunately. I wondered why that was unfortunate. Then I remembered the little girl's empty room we'd passed. Something told me it might be best not to ask about that. We appreciate your help, I told Josephine. But I still don't understand. You say Artemis knows about this place. You and Emmy were hunters? Josephine's neck muscles tightened against the collar of her pink polo. We were. I frowned. I'd always thought of my sister's followers as a sort of all-maiden mafia. Once you were in, you never left, unless you left in a lovely silver coffin, but... Long story. Josephine cut me off. I probably should let Hemethea tell it. Hemethea? The name hit me like one of Way Station's bricks. My face felt as if it was slipping down to the centre of my chest. Bleme style. Suddenly I realised why Emmy had looked familiar. No wonder I'd felt such a sense of unease. Emmy. Short for Hemethea. The Hemethea. Josephine glanced from side to side. You really didn't know? She jabbed her finger over her shoulder. So, I'm going to get back to the welding now. There's food and drinks in the kitchen. Make yourselves at home. She beat a hasty retreat back to her workshop. Dang, Leo muttered. She's awesome. Leo arched his eyebrows. Were you and Hemethea an item back in the day or something? When you heard her name, you looked like somebody kicked you in the crotch. Leo Valdez. In 4,000 years, no one has ever dared to kick me in the crotch. If you mean I looked slightly shocked, that's because I knew Hemethea when she was a young princess in ancient Greece. We were never an item. However, I'm the one who made her immortal. Leo's eyes drifted towards the workshop, where Josephine had begun to weld again. I thought all hunters became immortal once they took the pledge to Artemis. You misunderstand, I said. I made Hemethea immortal before she became a hunter. In fact, I turned her into a god. Chapter 5. Tell you a story? Or I could just, pass out and twitch on the couch? This was Leo's cue to sit at my feet and listen, enraptured, as I told him the story. Instead, he waved vaguely towards the workshop. Yeah, okay, I'm going to check out the forges. He left me by myself. Demigods today. I blame social media for their short attention spans. When you can't even take the time to listen to a god hold forth, that's just sad. Unfortunately, the story insisted on being remembered. Voices, faces and emotions from 3,000 years ago flooded my mind, taking control of my senses with such force that I almost crumpled. Over the past few weeks, during our travels west, these waking visions have been happening with alarming frequency. Perhaps they were the result of my faulty human neurons trying to process godly memories. Perhaps Zeus was punishing me with vivid flashbacks of my most spectacular failures. Or perhaps my time as a mortal was simply driving me crazy. Whatever the case, I barely managed to reach the nearest couch before collapsing. I was dimly aware of Leo and Josephine standing at the welding station, Josephine in her welder's gear and Leo in his boxer shorts, chatting about whatever project Josephine was working on. They didn't seem to notice my distress. Then the memory swallowed me. I found myself hovering above the ancient Mediterranean. Sparkling blue water stretched to the horizon. A warm, salty wind buoyed me up. Directly below, the white cliffs of Naxos rose from the surf like the Balaam ridge of a whale's mouth. From a town about 300 yards inland, 2 teenage girls ran for their lives, making their way towards the edge of the cliff with an armed mob close behind them. The girls' white dresses billowed, and their long dark hair whipped in the wind. Despite their bare feet, the rocky terrain did not slow them down. Bronzed and lithe, they were clearly used to racing outdoors, but they were running towards a dead end. At the head of the mob, a portly man in red robes screamed and waved the handle of a broken ceramic jar. A gold crown glinted on his brow. Streaks of wine had crusted his grey beard. His name came to me. Staphylos, king of Naxos, a demigod son of Dionysus. Staphylos had inherited all of his father's worst traits and none of his party dude chill. Now, in a drunken rage, he was yelling something about his daughters breaking his finest amphora of wine, and so naturally they had to die. "I'll kill you both," he screamed. "I will tear you apart." I mean, if the girls had broken a Stradivarius violin or gold-plated harmonica, I might have understood his rage. But a jar of wine? The girls ran on, crying to the gods for help. Normally this sort of thing would not have been my problem. People cried to the gods for help all the time. They almost never offered anything interesting in return. I probably would have just hovered over the scene, thinking, "Oh dear, what a shame. Ouch, ooh, that must have hurt," and then gone about my normal business. This particular day, however, I was not flying over Naxos merely by chance. I was on my way to see the drop-dead gorgeous Royo, the king's eldest daughter, with whom I happened to be in love. Neither of the girls below was Royo. I recognised them as her younger sisters, Parthenos and Hamifia. Nevertheless, I doubted Royo would appreciate it if I failed to help her sisters on my way to our big date. "Hey, babe, I just saw your sisters get chased off a cliff and plummet to their deaths. You want to catch a movie or something?" But if I helped her sisters, against the wishes of their homicidal father and in front of a crowd of witnesses, that would require divine intervention. There would be forms to fill out, and the three fates would demand everything in triplicate. While I was deliberating, Parthenos and Hamifia charged towards the precipice. They must have realised they had nowhere to go, but they didn't even slow down. "Help us, Apollo," Hamifia cried. "Our fate rests with you." Then, holding hands, the two sisters leapt into the void. Such a show of faith. It took my breath away. I couldn't very well let them go splat after they'd entrusted me with their lives. Now, Hermes, sure, he might have let them die. He would have found that hilarious. Hermes is a twisted little scamp. But Apollo, no, I had to honour such courage and panache. Parthenos and Hamifia never hit the surface of the water. I stretched out my hands and zapped the girls with a mighty zap, imparting some of my own divine life force into them. Oh, how you should envy those girls. Shimmering and disappearing with a golden flash, filled with tingly warmth and newfound power, they floated upward in a cloud of Tinkerbell-quality glitter. It is no small thing to make someone a god. The general rule is that power trickles down, so any god can theoretically make a new god of lesser power than him or herself. But this requires sacrificing some of one's own divinity, a small amount of what makes you, you. So gods don't grant such a favour often. When we do, we usually create only the most minor of gods, as I did with Parthenos and Hamifia. Just the basic immortality package with few bells and whistles, although I threw in the extended warranty because I'm a nice guy. Beaming with gratitude, Parthenos and Hamifia flew up to meet me. "Thank you, Lord Apollo," Parthenos said. "Did Artemis send you?" My smile faltered. "Artemis? She must have," Hamifia said. "As we fell, I prayed, 'Help us, Artemis.'" "No," I said, "you cried out, 'Help us, Apollo.'" The girls looked at each other. No, my lord," said Hamifia. I was sure she had said my name. In retrospect, however, I wondered if I had been assuming rather than listening. The three of us stared at one another. That moment when you turned to two girls immortal, and they found out they didn't call on you to do so. Awkward. "Well, it doesn't matter," Hamifia said cheerfully. "We owe you a great debt, and now we are free to follow our heart's desires." I was hoping she would say to serve Apollo for all eternity and bring him a warm lemon-scented towel before every meal. Instead, Parthenos said, "Yes, we will join the hunters of Artemis. Thank you, Apollo." They used their new powers to vaporize, leaving me alone with an angry mob of Naxoans, screaming and shaking their fists at the sea. The worst thing? The girl's sister, Roio, broke up with me like a week later. Over the centuries I saw Hermithia and Parthenos from time to time in Artemis's retinue. Mostly we avoided each other. Making them minor gods was one of those benevolent mistakes I didn't want to write any songs about. My vision changed, shifting us subtly as the light through the way station's rose window. I found myself in a vast apartment of gold and white marble. Beyond the glass walls and the wraparound terrace, afternoon shadows flooded the skyscraper canyons of Manhattan. I had been here before. No matter where my visions took me, I always seemed to end up back in this nightmarish scene. Reclining on a gilded chaise-longue, the Emperor Nero looked horrifically resplendent in a purple suit, a blue pastel shirt and pointy alligator leather shoes. On his sizable porch, he balanced a plate of strawberries, popping them one at a time into his mouth with his little finger raised to show off the 100-carat diamond on his pinky ring. Meg! He shook his head sadly. Dear Meg, you should be more excited. This is your chance for redemption, my dear. You won't disappoint me, will you? His voice was soft and gentle, like a heavy snowfall, the sort that builds up and brings down power lines, collapses roofs, and kills entire families. Standing before the Emperor, Meg McCaffrey looked like a wilting plant. Her dark pageboy hair hung listlessly around her face. She slumped in her green t-shirt dress, her knees bent in her yellow leggings, one red, high top kicking listlessly at the marble floor. Her face was lowered, but I could see that her cat-eye glasses had been broken since our last encounter. Scotch tape covered the rhinestone tips at either end. Under the weight of Nero's gaze, she seemed so small and vulnerable. I wanted to rush to her side. I wanted to smash that plate of strawberries into Nero's chinless, neck-bearded excuse for her face. Alas, I could only watch, knowing that this scene had already happened. I had seen it unfold several times in my visions over the last few weeks. Meg didn't speak, but Nero nodded as if she'd answered his question. Go west, he told her. Capture Apollo before he can find the next oracle. If you cannot bring him to me alive, kill him. He crooked his diamond-weighted pinky finger from the line of imperial bodyguards behind him, one step forward. Like all Gemini, the man was enormous. His muscular arms bulged against his leather cuirass. His brown hair grew wild and long. His rugged face would have been scary even without the serpent tattoo that coiled around his neck and up his right cheek. This is Vortigern, said Nero. He will keep you safe. The Emperor tasted the word safe, as if it had many possible meanings, none of them good. You will also travel with another member of the imperial household, just in case difficulties arise. Nero curled his pinky again. From the shadows near the stairs appeared a teenage boy, who looked very much like the sort of boy who enjoyed appearing from shadows. His dark hair hung over his eyes. He wore baggy black jeans, a black muscle shirt, despite his lack of muscles, and enough gold jewellery around his neck to make him a proper festival idol. At his belt hung 3 sheathed daggers, 2 on the right and 1 on the left. The predatory gleam in his eyes made me suspect those blades were not just for show. In all, the boy reminded me somewhat of Nico D'Angelo, the son of Hades, if Nico was slightly older, more vicious, and had been raised by jackals. Ah, good Marcus, Nero said. Show Meg your destination, will you? Marcus smiled thinly. He held up his palm, and a glowing image appeared above his fingertips, a bird's-eye view of the city I now recognised as Indianapolis. Nero popped another strawberry in his mouth. He chewed it slowly, letting the juice dribble down his weak chin. I decided that if I ever returned to Camp Half-Blood, I would have to convince Chiron to change their cash crop to blueberries. Meg, my dear, Nero said, I want you to succeed. Please don't fail. If the beast becomes cross with you again. He shrugged helplessly. His voice ached with sincerity and concern. I just don't know how I could protect you. Find Apollo. Subject him to your will. I know you can do this. And, my dear, do be careful in the court of our friend, the new Hercules. He is not as much a gentleman as I. Don't get caught up in his obsession with destroying the house of nets. There's a mere sideshow. Succeed quickly and come back to me. Nero spread his arms. Then we can be one happy family again. The boy Marcus opened his mouth, perhaps to make a snide comment, but when he spoke, it was Leo Valdez's voice, shattering the vision. Apollo! I gasped. I was back in the way station, sprawled across the couch. Standing over me, frowning with concern, were our hosts, Josephine and Emmy, along with Leo and Calypso. I had a dream. I pointed weakly at Emmy. And you were there. And the rest of you, not so much, but a dream. Leo shook his head. He was now dressed in a pair of grimy overalls. Man, your eyes were wide open. You were lying there all twitching and stuff. I've seen you have some visions before, but not like that. I realised my arms were shaking. I grabbed my right hand with my left, but that only made it worse. I heard some new details, or things I didn't remember from before, about Meg and the Emperors, and... Josephine patted my head as if I were a cocker spaniel. You sure you're okay there, Sonny? You don't look so hot. There was a time when I would have deep-fried anyone who called me Sonny. After I took over the reins of the sun chariot from the old Titan god Helios, Ares had called me Sonny for centuries. It was one of the few jokes he understood, at least one of the few clean jokes. I'm fine, I snapped. What's going on? Calypso, you're already healed? You've been out for hours, actually. She raised her recently broken hand, which now looked as good as new, and wriggled her fingers. But yes, Emmy is a healer to rival Apollo. You had to say that, I grumbled. You mean I've been lying here for hours and nobody noticed? Leo shrugged. We were kind of busy talking shop. We probably wouldn't have noticed you as soon as we did, except, somebody here wants to talk to you. Calypso agreed, a worried look in her eyes. He's been very insistent about it. She pointed towards the rose window. At first, I thought I was seeing orange spots. Then I realised an apparition was floating towards me. Our friend, Agamethus, the headless ghost, had returned. Chapter 6. Oh, Magic 8-Ball, epic fail at prophecies, Leo's ear on fire. The ghost drifted towards us. His body, his mood was difficult to discern, since he had no face, but he seemed agitated. He pointed at me, then made a series of hand gestures I didn't understand, shaking his fists, lacing his fingers, cupping one hand as if holding a sphere. He stopped on the opposite side of the coffee table. Sup, Cheese? Leo asked. Josephine snorted. Cheese? Yeah, he's orange, Leo said. Why is that? Also, why is he headless? Leo, Calypso chided, don't be rude. Hey, it's a fair question. Emmy studied the ghost's hand gestures. I've never seen him this worked up. He glows orange because... Well, actually, I have no idea. As for why he is headless, his brother cut off his head, I supplied. The memory surfaced from the dark stew of my mortal brain, though I did not recall the details. Agamethus was the brother of Trophonius, the spirit of the dark oracle. There was something else, something that filled me with guilt, but I couldn't remember. The others stared at me. His brother did what? Calypso asked. How did you know that? Emmy demanded. I had no answer. I was not sure myself where the information had come from, but the ghost pointed at me as if to say, this dude knows what's up, or possibly, more disturbingly, it's your fault. Then he again made the gesture of holding a sphere. He wants the magic 8-Ball, Josephine interpreted. I'll be right back. She jogged over to her workshop. The magic 8-Ball? Leo grinned at Emmy. The name tag on his borrowed overalls read Georgie. She's kidding, right? She's dead serious, Emmy said. So to speak. We might as well sit. Calypso and Emmy took their armchairs. Leo hopped onto the couch next to me, bouncing up and down with such enthusiasm I had an annoying pang of nostalgia for Meg McCaffrey. As we waited for Josephine, I tried to dredge my memory for more specifics about this ghost, Agamethus. Why would his brother Trophonius have decapitated him? And why did I feel so guilty about it? But I had no success, just a vague sense of unease, and the feeling that despite his lack of eyes, Agamethus was glaring at me. Finally, Josie trotted back over. In one hand, she gripped a black plastic sphere the size of a honeydew melon. On one side, painted in the middle of a white circle, was the number 8. I love those things, Leo said. Haven't seen one in years. I scowled at the sphere, wondering if it was some sort of bomb. That would explain Leo's excitement. What does it do? Are you kidding? Asked Leo. It's a magic 8-Ball, man. You ask it questions about the future. Impossible, I said. I am the god of prophecy. I know every form of divination, and I have never heard of a magic 8-Ball. Calypso leaned forward. I'm not familiar with this form of sorcery either. How does it work? Josephine beamed. Well, it's supposed to just be a toy. You shake it, turn it over, and answer floats up on this little plastic window on the bottom. I made some modifications. Sometimes the magic 8-Ball picks up on Agamethus's thoughts and conveys them in writing. Sometimes, Leo asked. Josephine shrugged. Like 30% of the time. Best I could manage. I still had no idea what she was talking about. The magic 8-Ball struck me as a very shady form of divination, more like a Hermes game of chance than an oracle worthy of me. Wouldn't it be faster if Agamephis simply wrote down what he wanted to say? I asked. Emmy shot me a warning look. Agamephis is illiterate. He's a little sensitive about that. The ghost turned towards me, his aura darkened to the colour of a blood orange. Ah, I said. And those hand gestures he was making? It's no form of sign language that we can figure out, Joe said. We've been trying for 7 years, ever since Agamephis joined us. The magic 8-ball's the best form of communication we've got. Here, buddy. She tossed him the magical sphere. Since Agamephis was ethereal, I expected the ball to sail right through him and shatter on the floor. Instead, Agamephis caught it easily. Okay, Josephine said. So, Agamephis, what do you want to tell us? The ghost shook the magic 8-ball vigorously and then threw it to me. I was not prepared for the sphere to be full of liquid, which, as any water bottle flipper can tell you, makes an object much more difficult to control. It hit my chest and dropped into my lap. I barely caught it before it wobbled off the couch. Master of dexterity, Calypso muttered. Turn it over. Weren't you listening? Oh, be quiet. I wish Calypso could only communicate 30% of the time. I rotated the ball bottom up. As Josephine described, a layer of clear plastic was set in the base of the sphere, providing a window to the liquid inside. A large white, multi-sided dice floated into view. I knew this thing smacked of Hermes' wretched gambling games. One side of it pressed against the window, revealing a sentence written in block letters. Apollo must bring her home, I read aloud. I looked up. Emmy's and Josephine's faces had become twin masks of shock. Calypso and Leo exchanged a wary glance. Leo started to say, what? Simultaneously, Emmy and Josephine unleashed a torrent of questions. Is she alive? Is she safe? Where is she? Tell me. Emmy shot to her feet. She began to pace, sobbing in great dry heaves, while Josephine advanced on me, her fist clenched, her gaze as sharp as the pointed flame of her welding torch. I don't know. I tossed Josephine the ball as if it were a hot baklava. Don't kill me. She caught the magic 8-ball and then seemed to check herself. She took a heavy breath. Sorry, Apollo. Sorry, She turned to Agamephis. Here, answer us, tell us. She threw him the ball. Agamephis seemed to regard the magical sphere with his non-existent eyes. His shoulders slumped, as if he did not relish his job. He shook the ball once again and tossed it back to me. Why me? I protested. Read it, Emmy snapped. I turned it over. A new message appeared out of the liquid. Reply hazy, I read aloud. Try again later. Emmy wailed in despair. She sank into her seat and buried her face in her hands. Josephine rushed to her side. Leo frowned at the ghost. Yo, Cheese, just shake it again, man. It's no use, Josephine said. When the magic 8-ball says try again later, that's exactly what it means. We'll have to wait. She sat on the arm of Emmy's chair and cradled Emmy's head against her. It's all right, Josie murmured. We'll find her. We'll get her back. Hesitantly, Calypso stretched out her palm, as if she weren't sure how to help. I'm so sorry. Who is missing? With a quivering lip, Josephine pointed to Leo. Leo blinked. I'm still here. Not you, Josephine said. The name tag. Those overalls. They were hers. Leo patted the stitched name on his chest. Georgie. Emmy nodded, her eyes puffy and red. Georgina, our adopted daughter. I was glad I was sitting down. Suddenly so many things made sense that they overwhelmed me like another vision. The 2 aging hunters who were not hunters, the child's empty bedroom, the crayon drawings done by a little girl. Josephine had mentioned that Agamephis arrived in their lives approximately 7 years ago. You 2 left the hunters, I said. For each other. Josephine gazed into the distance as if the building's walls were as transparent as the magic 8-ball's base. We didn't exactly plan it. We left in, 1986? 87, Emmy said. We've been aging together ever since, very happily. She wiped away a tear, not looking terribly happy at the moment. Calypso flexed her recent broken hand. I don't know much about Lady Artemis or her rules for followers. That's fine, Leo interrupted. Calypso glared at him. But don't they forswear the company of men? If you 2 fell in love. No, I said bitterly. All romance is off limits. My sister is quite unreasonable in that regard. The mission of the hunters is to live without romantic distractions of any kind. Thinking about my sister and her anti-romantic ideas irritated me. How could 2 siblings be so different? But I was also irritated with Hemethia. She had not only given up being a hunter, in doing so she had also given up the divinity I had granted her. Just like a human, we give you immortality and godly power, and then you trade it in for love and a loft in downtown Indianapolis. The nerve! Emmy wouldn't meet my eyes. She sighed wistfully. We delighted in being hunters, both of us. They were our family, but..." She shrugged. "We loved each other more," Josephine supplied. I got the feeling they finished each other's sentences a lot. Their thoughts were in such comfortable harmony. That did not help my irritation levels. "You must have parted with Artemis on good terms," I said. "She let you live." Josephine nodded. "The ladies hunters often stop here at the way station, though we have not seen Artemis herself in decades. Then, 7 years ago, we were blessed with Georgina. She was brought to our door by Agathopus." The orange ghost bowed. "He brought her from where?" I wondered. Emmy spread her hands. "We've never been able to get that information from him. It's the one question the magic 8-ball never answers." Leo must have been thinking deeply. A tuft of fire broke out of the top of his left ear. "Hold up. Agathopus isn't your kid's dad, is he? Also, you're telling me I'm wearing the overalls of a 7-year-old girl, and they fit?" That got a broken laugh from Josephine. "I suppose they do, and no, Leo, Agathopus is not Georgina's father. Our ghostly friend has been dead since ancient times. Like Apollo said, he was the brother of Trophonius, the spirit of the oracle. Agathopus appeared here with baby Georgie. Then he led us to the oracle. That was the first we knew of its existence." "So, you have its location?" I said. "Of course," Emmy murmured, "for all the good it does us." Too many questions crowded my head. I wanted to divide myself into a dozen different manifestations so I could pursue every answer at once. But alas, mortals don't split easily. But the girl and the oracle must be connected somehow. Emmy closed her eyes. I could tell she was trying hard to suppress a sob. We didn't realise how closely they were connected until... well, not until Georgie was taken from us. "The Emperor," I guessed. Josephine nodded. Hadn't even met this second member of the Triumvirate yet, and I already hated him. I'd lost Meg McCaffrey to Nero. I did not like the idea of another young girl being taken by another evil emperor. In my vision, I recalled, I heard Nero call this emperor the new Hercules. Who is he? What did he do with Georgina? Emmy rose unsteadily to her feet. I need to do something productive with my hands. It's the only way I've stayed sane the past 2 weeks. Why don't you all help us make lunch? Then we'll talk about the monster who controls our city.